The sun beat down mercilessly on the dusty trail leading into Paso Robles, California, and Lily Bradford's stomach twisted with a hunger so fierce she could taste bile in her throat. But she pressed her cracked lips together and reminded herself that tomorrow was an eating day. The summer of 1882 had been particularly brutal, and the meager supplies she'd managed to pack into her weathered satchel before fleeing Santa Fe were dwindling faster than she'd calculated. She'd been walking for 3 days now, her boots worn thin at the soles, her dress stained with dust and sweat, and every step brought a fresh wave of dizziness that made the horizon shimmer like water. The small town appeared in the distance like a mirage, adobe buildings and wooden storefronts clustered together against the golden hills of California. Lily had heard that Paso Robles was growing, that there might be work for a woman willing to do honest labor, and she needed work desperately. Her father's ranch back in New Mexico was gone, sold to pay his debts after he'd died of pneumonia that harsh winter. Her stepmother had wasted no time in making it clear that Lily was no longer welcome, and with no other family to turn to, she'd taken what little money she could scrape together and headed west. She stumbled as she reached the edge of town, catching herself against a hitching post. Her vision swam, black spots dancing at the edges, and she gripped the weathered wood until her knuckles went white. When her head cleared enough to stand straight, she noticed a man watching her from across the street. He was tall, broad-shouldered, wearing dusty chaps and a dark hat pulled low over his eyes. Even from this distance, she could feel the weight of his gaze, assessing and curious. Lily straightened her spine, lifting her chin with what little dignity she could muster. She would not be pitied. She would not be seen as weak. She had made it this far on her own, and she would find work, would earn her keep, would survive just as she'd been doing since her father passed. The man tipped his hat slightly, then turned and walked into what looked like a general store, and Lily exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding. The town was busier than she'd expected. Cowboys and ranchers moved along the wooden sidewalks, their spurs jingling with each step. Women in practical dresses carried baskets, heading to and from the market. A blacksmith's hammer rang out in steady rhythm somewhere nearby, and the smell of fresh bread wafted from a bakery that made Lily's stomach clench painfully. She forced herself to look away, to focus on finding the sort of establishment that might need help. The saloon was her first stop, though she approached it with trepidation. Saloon girls made decent money, but the work often came with expectations she wasn't prepared to meet. Still, she needed to eat, needed a place to sleep that wasn't the hard ground, and she was running out of options. The proprietor, a heavy-set woman with shrewd eyes and graying hair, looked her up and down with obvious skepticism. "You ever worked in a saloon before, girl?" "No, madam, but I am a hard worker. I can serve drinks clean, whatever you need." The woman's lips pursed. "You look half-starved. When's the last time you ate?" Lily hesitated, then lied. "This morning." The woman didn't look convinced. "I got all the help I need right now." "Try the hotel down the street, or maybe the restaurant. They're always looking for kitchen help." Lily thanked her and left, trying not to let disappointment show on her face. The hotel had no openings. The restaurant owner took one look at her dusty, bedraggled appearance and shook his head before she could even ask. By the time the sun began to sink toward the horizon, painting the sky in shades of orange and pink, Lily's legs were trembling with exhaustion, and the dizziness had returned with a vengeance. She found herself standing outside the general store, the same one the tall cowboy had entered hours earlier. Through the window, she could see shelves stocked with goods: canned foods, sacks of flour and sugar, coffee, dried beans. Her mouth watered traitorously. Tomorrow, she reminded herself. Tomorrow she would eat what little she had left. Maybe by then she'd have found some kind of work, even if it was just mucking out stalls or doing laundry. "You lost, miss." Lily spun around, nearly losing her balance in the process. The tall cowboy from earlier stood behind her, his hat pushed back now so she could see his face clearly. He had strong, weathered features, the kind that came from years of working outdoors, and dark eyes that seemed to see right through her carefully maintained composure. A scar ran along his jaw, white against tanned skin, and his dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the nape of his neck. "No," she said, perhaps too quickly. "Just looking mighty hard at that store window." His voice was deep, with a hint of something that might have been amusement. "You new to Paso Robles? I arrived today. I am looking for work." He studied her for a long moment, and Lily had the uncomfortable feeling that he could see exactly how desperate her situation was. His gaze traveled over her worn boots, her dusty dress, the satchel that hung from her shoulder with obvious lightness. When his eyes met hers again, something in his expression had softened. "What kind of work?" "Anything honest," she said, lifting her chin. "I can cook, clean, mend clothes. I grew up on a ranch, so I know my way around horses and cattle. I'm not afraid of hard work." "You got a name?" "Lily Bradford. Mason Lawson." He touched the brim of his hat in a gesture that was somehow both respectful and casual. "I run a ranch about 5 miles outside of town. Could use someone who can cook decent meals for the hands. My foreman's wife used to do it, but they moved on last month and we have been making do with whatever we can throw together. It is not pretty." Hope flared in Lily's chest, bright and almost painful. "I can cook," she said quickly. "My mother taught me before she passed. I can make a little go a long way, and I promise you will not regret hiring me." Mason's expression shifted, became more serious. "It is rough work. We got about 8 hands living on the property, and they eat like they are hollow. Breakfast before dawn, lunch at midday, supper in the evening. You would have your own room in the main house, and the pay is fair. $30 a month plus room and board. $30. It was more than Lily had dared to hope for. She could save money, could start building a life for herself, could stop rationing every morsel of food like it might be her last. "When can I start? You eaten today?" The question caught her off guard. She opened her mouth to repeat the lie she'd told the saloon owner, but something in Mason's steady gaze made the words die in her throat. She looked away, heat creeping into her cheeks. "I have been traveling. I will eat tonight." "That was not what I asked." Lily's jaw tightened. "I am fine, Mr. Lawson. If you are offering me a position, I accept. If not, then I need to continue my search before it gets full dark." Mason was quiet for a moment, then nodded slowly. "Wait here." He disappeared into the general store before she could respond. Lily stood on the sidewalk, uncertain and increasingly anxious. Had she offended him with her sharp tone? Had he changed his mind about the job? She couldn't afford to alienate the only person who'd offered her any kind of opportunity. She was contemplating whether to leave or stay when the door opened and Mason emerged carrying a paper-wrapped package. He held it out to her. "Here." Lily stared at the package, then at him. "What is this?" "Food. Bread, cheese, some dried beef. Figured you could eat while we ride out to the ranch. I cannot accept this." The words came out stiff, proud, even as her stomach cramped with hunger. "I have not earned it yet. Consider it an advance on your wages." Mason's tone left no room for argument. "And before you get all bristled up again, understand this. I need a cook who can stand up long enough to make a meal. You look like you are about to fall over. So you are going to eat that, and then we are going to head to the ranch, and tomorrow morning you are going to cook breakfast for 8 hungry cowboys. That sounds like a plan." Lily wanted to argue, wanted to maintain the pride that was about all she had left, but the practical part of her mind won out. She took the package with trembling hands. "Thank you. My horse is at the livery. You got anything besides that bag?" "No, this is everything." Something flickered in Mason's eyes, something that might have been sympathy or sadness, but he just nodded and gestured for her to follow him. As they walked through the cooling evening air, Lily unwrapped the package and forced herself to eat slowly, despite the ravenous hunger that demanded she shove it all in her mouth at once. The bread was fresh, still slightly warm, and the cheese was sharp and creamy. The dried beef was tough but flavorful, and she had to suppress a small sound of pleasure at the taste of it. "When did you last eat?" Mason asked, his voice conversational as they walked. "And do not lie to me this time." Lily swallowed her mouthful of bread carefully. "Yesterday morning." "And before that, the morning before." She kept her eyes on the street ahead, refusing to look at him. "I have limited supplies. I was stretching them to last until I found work." "So you have been eating every other day?" It wasn't a question. Lily didn't bother to confirm it. She took another bite of cheese, savoring the richness of it, the way it sat heavy and satisfying in her stomach. She'd forgotten what it felt like to eat without calculating how many days the food had to last, without the gnawing anxiety that came with watching her supplies dwindle. The livery stable was busy with evening activity, ranchers collecting their horses after a day in town. Mason's horse was a big bay gelding with intelligent eyes and a calm demeanor. He saddled the animal with efficient movements while Lily finished eating, then turned to her with an expectant look. "You can ride?" "Yes." She'd been riding since she was a child, though it had been months since she'd been on a horse. Her father had sold most of their stock before he died, trying desperately to keep the ranch afloat. Mason swung up into the saddle, then reached down to her. "Give me your bag, then take my hand." Lily hesitated only a moment before complying. His hand was calloused and strong, and he pulled her up behind him with an ease that spoke of considerable strength. She settled onto the horse's back, acutely aware of how close they were, how she had to hold onto his waist to keep her balance. She could feel the solid warmth of him through his shirt, could smell leather and soap, and something that was distinctly masculine. "Hold on," Mason said, and urged the horse forward. They rode out of Paso Robles as the last light faded from the sky, following a well-worn trail that led into the hills. The land here was beautiful in a stark, golden way, rolling grasslands broken by clusters of oak trees. In the distance, Lily could see mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky. The air cooled as they rode, bringing relief from the day's heat, and for the first time in weeks, Lily felt something other than fear and exhaustion. The ranch appeared after about 40 minutes of steady riding, a collection of buildings clustered in a small valley. The main house was a sturdy wooden structure with a wide porch, larger than Lily had expected. A barn stood nearby, along with a bunkhouse, a stable, and various outbuildings. Lamplight glowed in the windows of the bunkhouse, and she could hear the low murmur of men's voices. Mason reined in the horse near the main house and dismounted, then helped Lily down. Her legs were unsteady after the ride, and she had to grab his arm to keep from stumbling. His hand came up to steady her, warm against her elbow. "Easy now. You all right?" "Yes, thank you. Just tired." He studied her face in the dim light spilling from the house windows, then nodded. "Come on, I will show you to your room and you can get settled. Tomorrow will be a long day." The inside of the house was neat and simply furnished. The main room had a stone fireplace, several chairs, and a large table. Mason led her down a short hallway and opened a door to reveal a small bedroom. It held a narrow bed with a simple quilt, a dresser, a washstand with a pitcher and basin, and a small window that looked out toward the barn. "This will be yours," Mason said. "Bathroom is at the end of the hall. Kitchen is through that door off the main room. I will show you where everything is in the morning, but for now, get some rest. Breakfast is usually around 5:30, so you will want to be up by 4:30 to get started." Lily set her satchel on the bed, looking around the room with something close to wonder. It was small, simple, but it was hers. A space where she could close the door and be alone, where she could sleep without worrying about animals or men with bad intentions. "Thank you, Mr. Lawson, for the job and for the food and for not asking too many questions. Call me Mason. We do not stand on ceremony much out here." He paused in the doorway, his expression difficult to read in the shadows. "And Lily, about the eating thing. I meant what I said. Do not skip meals again. I need you healthy and strong, and that means 3 meals a day, same as everyone else. Understood?" There was something in his voice, an intensity that made her throat tighten. She nodded. "Understood. Good. Sleep well." He closed the door behind him, and Lily was alone. She sank onto the bed, her whole body trembling with a combination of relief and exhaustion. She'd made it. She'd found work, found a place to stay, found a chance to start over. And tomorrow, she would prove to Mason Lawson that hiring her had been the right decision. She slept deeply that night, more deeply than she had in months, and when she woke to the sound of roosters crowing in the pre-dawn darkness, she felt more rested than she'd thought possible. She dressed quickly, splashed cold water on her face from the basin, and made her way to the kitchen. The space was larger than she'd expected, with a big cast iron stove, a sturdy work table, shelves stocked with dry goods, and a well-organized pantry. She found eggs in a basket, bacon hanging in the cold room, flour and baking powder for biscuits, coffee beans that needed grinding. Her hands moved with the automatic efficiency of long practice, stoking the stove, mixing biscuit dough, starting coffee, slicing bacon. By the time the sky began to lighten outside the window, the kitchen was filled with good smells, and Lily had biscuits in the oven, bacon sizzling on the stovetop, and eggs ready to fry. She heard boots on the porch, male voices, and then the door opened and men began filing in. They were a varied group, these ranch hands. Young and old, weathered and fresh-faced, but all of them tired and hungry. They settled at the long table in the main room, and Lily served them with quiet efficiency, plate after plate of hot food and strong coffee. The men ate with focused determination, too hungry for much conversation, but she caught appreciative looks and murmured thanks. Mason was the last to enter. He'd clearly already been working, his shirt damp with sweat despite the early hour. His eyes found her immediately, scanning her face with that same assessing look from yesterday. "Morning," he said. "Good morning. Coffee, please." She poured him a cup, then set a plate in front of him. He ate without speaking, but she noticed he watched her as she moved around the kitchen, cleaning up, preparing more biscuits as the first batch disappeared. When the men finally began to leave, heading out for the day's work, several of them stopped to thank her. "Best breakfast we have had in weeks, miss," one older cowboy said, grinning. "You are a right blessing. Glad you enjoyed it." When the last man had left, only Mason remained at the table. He finished his coffee, then set the cup down and looked at her directly. "That was good. Real good." "Thank you. You eat yet?" Lily blinked. In the rush of cooking and serving, she'd forgotten about herself entirely. "I will in a moment. Sit down, I will clean up." "That is not necessary. It is my job to, Lily." He stood, moving toward her with surprising grace for such a large man. "Sit down and eat. That is an order from your employer." She wanted to argue, but something in his expression told her it would be futile. She sat, and he placed a plate in front of her, loaded with food just as generous as the portions he'd served himself. Then he began collecting dishes, carrying them to the sink with the ease of someone accustomed to taking care of himself. Lily ate slowly, watching him work. It was strange, having a man do kitchen work, especially a ranch owner. Most men she'd known would have considered it beneath them. But Mason moved around the space with practical efficiency, clearly unconcerned with whether the task was masculine or not. "You do not have to do that," she said finally. "Figured you did enough this morning. Besides, I grew up doing my own dishes. My mother made sure both me and my brothers knew how to take care of ourselves." He glanced back at her. "You got siblings?" "No, it was just me and my father after my mother passed when I was 12. That is young to lose a mother." "Yes." Lily took a bite of biscuit, the buttery richness of it still almost overwhelming after so many days of near starvation. "Your mother sounds like a practical woman." "She was. Died about 5 years back, fever. My father went the year after. Just could not go on without her, I think." Mason's voice was matter-of-fact, but Lily heard the edge of old grief in it. "That is when I came out here, bought this land, started building the ranch. My brother stayed back in Texas, running the family place. You do not miss it, Texas, I mean. Sometimes. But I needed to build something of my own, you know, needed to prove I could." He finished the dishes and dried his hands on a towel, then turned to face her. "What about you? What brought you all the way to California?" Lily chose her words carefully. "My father died last winter. The ranch was in debt, and my stepmother sold it. There was nothing left for me there, so I decided to head west and start fresh. Must have been hard, making that journey alone. I managed. By eating every other day and walking until your boots wore through." Mason's tone was gentle, but there was steel underneath. "That is not managing, Lily. That is surviving by a thread." Heat flooded her cheeks. "I did what I had to do. Not all of us have family ranches to fall back on." "No, I suppose not." He studied her for a long moment. "But you are here now and you work for me, which means you eat 3 meals a day every day, no exceptions. Clear?" "I heard you the first time." "Good. Because I will be checking to make sure you do. I have seen what hunger does to people, and I will not have it happening under my roof." There was something fierce in his voice, something that spoke of personal experience. Lily found herself curious despite herself, but before she could ask, Mason pushed away from the counter and headed toward the door. "I've got work to do. Lunch is usually around noon, nothing fancy. Leftovers and bread are fine. Supper is at 6. Think you can handle it, of course. Then I will see you at noon." He left, and Lily was alone in the kitchen. She finished her breakfast, then set about cleaning up what little remained. As she worked, she thought about Mason's intensity regarding her eating, the way he'd watched to make sure she filled her plate, the order to never skip meals. It went beyond simple employer concern. There was something personal in it, something that made her wonder about his past. The days that followed fell into a rhythm. Lily woke before dawn, cooked massive breakfasts for the hungry ranch hands, cleaned up, prepared lunch, spent her afternoons baking bread and preparing for supper, then cooked another large meal in the evening. It was exhausting work, but it was honest and she was good at it. The men appreciated her efforts, and she began to learn their names and personalities. There was Tom, the older cowboy who always complimented her cooking. Young Billy, who could not have been more than 19 and was perpetually hungry. Samuel, the quiet foreman who spoke in careful, measured words. And then there was Mason. He ate every meal at the main house, usually lingering after the other men had left. Sometimes he helped with dishes despite her protests. Other times he sat at the table with coffee, going over ranch accounts or just watching her work. He asked questions, slow and steady, learning about her life before Paso Robles. She found herself telling him things she'd never intended to share. About her mother's death, about the hard years that followed, about her father's gradual decline and her stepmother's coldness. In return, he shared pieces of his own story. He'd grown up the youngest of 3 brothers on a cattle ranch in Texas. His father had been a hard man, demanding and often cruel, and his mother had been the softening force that kept the family together. When she died, something in his father had broken, and Mason had realized he needed to leave before he broke too. He'd come to California with money he'd saved, bought land that no one else wanted, and spent 3 years turning it into a working ranch. "It is not much yet," he said one evening about 2 weeks after Lily had arrived. They were sitting on the porch after supper, watching the sun set over the hills. "But it is mine. Every fence post, every head of cattle, every board in this house. I built it with my own hands and my own money, and no one can take it from me." "That must feel good," Lily said softly, "having something that is truly yours." "It does." He glanced at her, his dark eyes reflecting the orange light of the sunset. "You ever think about what you want to build?" "Long term, I mean." Lily considered the question. A month ago, she would not have been able to answer it. Her whole world had been reduced to survival, to making it through one more day. But now, with regular meals and a safe place to sleep, she found she could think beyond immediate necessity. "I want security," she said finally. "I want to know that I will not wake up one day with nothing. I want a place that is mine, where no one can tell me to leave. That is not too much to ask. It feels like it sometimes." Mason was quiet for a moment. "You could stay here, you know. Long as you want. The hands love your cooking, and I appreciate having someone competent running the household. You have got a place here as long as you want it." Something warm unfurled in Lily's chest at his words. "Thank you. That means more than you know." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Lily found herself acutely aware of Mason's presence beside her, the solid warmth of him, the way his profile looked in the gathering darkness. Over the past 2 weeks, she'd come to respect him enormously. He was fair with his men, worked harder than any of them, and treated her with a courtesy that never felt condescending. He was also, she was forced to admit, quite handsome in a rugged, weathered way. That thought made her uncomfortable. She was his employee, dependent on him for her livelihood. Any romantic feelings would be inappropriate and potentially disastrous. She stood abruptly, smoothing her skirts. "I should get the kitchen ready for tomorrow." Mason looked up at her, his expression unreadable. "All right, sleep well, Lily. You too." She fled inside, her heart beating faster than it should. She needed to be careful, needed to remember her place. She could not afford to develop feelings for her employer, no matter how kind he was, no matter how the sight of him made her pulse quicken. But avoiding her feelings proved easier said than done. As the weeks passed and summer deepened into early autumn, Lily found herself increasingly aware of Mason. The way he moved, all controlled strength and unconscious grace. The rare smile that transformed his usually serious face. The gentleness in his hands when he helped her with heavy pots or reached high shelves she could not access. The way he always made sure she ate, watching with satisfaction when she cleaned her plate. That last thing, his insistence on her eating regularly, continued to be a constant. He checked on her at every meal, made sure she took breaks, scolded her gently when he caught her working through lunch. At first, she'd found it overbearing, but gradually she came to understand it for what it was: care. He cared about her well-being in a way that went beyond employer concern. One morning in late September, she was in the kitchen preparing breakfast when Mason entered through the back door. He looked troubled, his jaw tight, and he poured himself coffee with distracted movements. "Everything all right?" Lily asked. "Storm coming?" "Big one from the look of the sky." "We are going to spend today making sure everything is secured, animals in the barn, equipment stored. Might be a rough couple of days." Lily glanced out the window. The sky was indeed dark with clouds, hanging low and heavy over the hills. The air felt thick, electric. "What do you need me to do?" "Just keep the coffee hot and maybe make extra food. The men will be working straight through until the storm hits, and they will need fuel." He paused, then added, "And stay inside once it starts. These California storms can be unpredictable." "I will." The men ate breakfast quickly that morning, gulping down food and coffee before heading out into the increasingly ominous day. Lily spent the morning baking, making extra bread and preparing a large pot of stew that could be easily reheated. By midday, the wind had picked up, whipping around the house and rattling the windows. The first drops of rain began to fall just as the men came in for a quick lunch. They were soaked and tired, eating with single-minded focus before heading back out. Mason was the last to leave, and he paused at the door to look back at her. "You have got enough wood for the stove?" "Yes, plenty." "Good. I will be in the barn with the animals. If you need anything, ring the bell on the porch." "I will be fine. Go take care of the stock." He hesitated, as if wanting to say something more, then nodded and disappeared into the storm. Lily returned to the kitchen, listening to the wind howl and the rain begin in earnest. It started as a steady drumming on the roof, then built to a roar that drowned out all other sound. Lightning flashed, followed by cracks of thunder that shook the house. She'd seen storms before, growing up in New Mexico, but this was something else entirely. The afternoon passed slowly. She kept the stove going, kept the coffee hot, prepared supper even though she had no idea if anyone would make it to the house to eat it. The storm showed no signs of abating, and as darkness fell, she began to worry. The men should have come in by now. It was past 6, nearly 7, and still no one appeared. She was considering braving the storm to ring the bell when the door finally burst open. Mason stumbled in, soaked to the skin and breathing hard. His hat was gone, his hair plastered to his head, and there was blood on his forehead. "Mason." Lily rushed to him. "What happened? Are you hurt?" "I am fine. Barn roof took some damage, had to shore it up, caught a falling board." He waved off her concern, but she could see he was exhausted. "The men are staying in the bunkhouse. Too dangerous to come over here right now." "Sit down." "Let me look at that cut." "It is nothing." "Sit down, Mason, please." Perhaps it was the use of his first name, or perhaps he was simply too tired to argue, but he sat. Lily fetched clean cloths and warm water, then gently cleaned the wound on his forehead. It was not deep, but it was bleeding freely, and she could see the beginnings of a bruise forming. He sat very still as she worked, his eyes closed, his breathing gradually slowing. "You should take off that wet shirt," she said when she'd finished bandaging his head. "You will catch your death." "In a minute." Too tired to move. Lily felt a surge of affection so strong it nearly took her breath away. Here was this strong, capable man, sitting exhausted and injured in her kitchen, trusting her to care for him. Before she could second-guess the impulse, she poured him coffee, then served him a large bowl of stew and fresh bread. "Eat," she ordered, using the same tone he'd used on her countless times. His eyes opened and he looked at the food, then at her, and something in his expression made her heart skip. "Yes, madam." He ate slowly, and she could see color returning to his face as the hot food worked its magic. When he'd finished, she took his bowl and refilled it without asking. He raised an eyebrow but did not protest, just ate the second portion with the same methodical determination. "Better?" she asked when he'd finished. "Much, thank you. Now go change into dry clothes before you get sick." Mason stood, swaying slightly, and Lily instinctively reached out to steady him. Her hand landed on his chest, and she could feel the solid muscle beneath the wet fabric, could feel his heart beating strong and steady. Their eyes met, and the air between them seemed to thicken, to crackle with something that had nothing to do with the storm outside. "Lily," he said, his voice rough, "I should tell you something." "What?" "I did not just hire you because I needed a cook. I mean, I did need one, but that was not the only reason." He reached up, his hand covering hers where it rested on his chest. "From the moment I saw you outside that store, looking so proud despite being half-starved and exhausted, I knew you were special. I have tried to keep it professional, tried to just be your employer, but I cannot stop thinking about you." Lily's breath caught. "Mason, you do not have to say anything. I know I am your employer and that makes this complicated, but I had to tell you, I had to be honest." His hand tightened on hers. "You deserve honesty." "I think about you too," she whispered. "All the time. I try not to, but I cannot help it." Something fierce and joyful flashed in his eyes. "Yeah. Yes." He stepped closer, his free hand coming up to cup her face. His thumb traced her cheekbone, gentle despite the calluses. "Can I kiss you?" Instead of answering, Lily rose on her toes and pressed her lips to his. He made a sound low in his throat and pulled her closer, deepening the kiss. His mouth was warm and surprisingly soft, and the kiss was everything she'd secretly dreamed about during the long nights since arriving at the ranch. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, his forehead rested against hers. "I have wanted to do that for weeks," he said. "Me too. We should probably talk about what this means, about how it changes things." "Later," Lily said. "Right now, you need to get out of those wet clothes before you catch pneumonia." He laughed, the sound warm and genuine, and kissed her again quickly before stepping back. "Yes, madam." "Will you still be up when I get back? I will wait for you." He disappeared down the hall, and Lily sagged against the counter, her hand pressed to her lips. She'd kissed Mason Lawson, her employer, the man who'd saved her from starvation and given her a chance at a new life. And it had been wonderful, everything she'd hoped and more. But what did it mean for her future? For her position here? Those worries seemed distant and unimportant when Mason returned wearing dry clothes, his hair still damp but no longer dripping. He settled at the table and she joined him with her own cup of coffee. The storm continued to rage outside, but inside the house felt warm and safe, like a haven from the chaos. "We should talk," Mason said. "All right." "I meant what I said. I have developed feelings for you, real feelings. But I do not want you to feel pressured or uncomfortable. If you would rather I kept my distance, I will respect that. Your job is secure no matter what, and I will make sure the men know to treat you with respect." Lily reached across the table and took his hand. "I do not want you to keep your distance. I want to see where this goes, but we should probably be discreet, at least at first. I do not want the men to think I am receiving special treatment or that I am not earning my place here. They already know you are earning your place. Best cook we have ever had and the hardest working." Mason squeezed her hand. "But I understand what you mean. We will take it slow, keep it between us until we know what this is. Thank you." They sat together as the storm raged, talking quietly about everything and nothing. Mason told her about his plans for the ranch, about wanting to expand the herd and maybe add some horses for breeding. Lily shared her dreams of someday having a small garden, of maybe learning to preserve fruits and vegetables for the winter. It was comfortable and easy, and Lily realized this was what she'd been missing her whole life. Someone who listened, who cared about her thoughts and dreams. Eventually, exhaustion caught up with both of them. Mason walked her to her bedroom door, and they shared another kiss, this one slow and sweet. Then he bid her good night and headed to his own room, and Lily closed the door behind her with a smile she could not suppress. The storm blew itself out overnight, and morning dawned clear and cool. The men emerged from the bunkhouse looking tired but unharmed, and they set about assessing and repairing the damage the storm had caused. The barn roof needed work, several fences had blown down, and there was debris scattered everywhere. It would take days to set everything right. Lily cooked steadily, making sure there was always hot food and coffee available for the workers. Mason was everywhere, directing repairs, working alongside his men, checking on the animals. He caught her eye whenever he came to the house, and the small smile he gave her made her heart flutter. Over the following weeks, they stole moments together. Brief conversations in the kitchen after the men had gone to bed, walks in the evening when the work was done, stolen kisses in the pantry or on the porch in the darkness. They kept it quiet, as they'd agreed, but Lily thought some of the men must have noticed the way Mason looked at her, the way he always seemed to find reasons to be near her. She was happier than she could remember being. The constant fear and hunger that had defined her life for so long had faded, replaced by contentment and hope. She had work she was good at, a comfortable place to live, and a man who looked at her like she was precious. It felt too good to be true, and sometimes she woke in the night terrified that it would all be taken away. On one such night in mid-October, she gave up on sleep and went to the kitchen to make tea. She was surprised to find Mason already there, sitting at the table in the darkness. "Could not sleep either?" he asked. "No, too many thoughts." She lit a lamp and put water on to boil. "What about you?" "Same." He watched her move around the kitchen. "Come here." She went to him and he pulled her onto his lap, wrapping his arms around her waist. She leaned back against his chest, feeling the steady beat of his heart. "I have been thinking," he said quietly. "About us, about the future." Lily's breath caught. "What about it?" "I know we have not been courting long, just a couple months, but I am not a young man anymore, Lily. I am 32 years old, and I have never felt about anyone the way I feel about you. I do not want to waste time pretending I am not sure about what I want." "What do you want?" "You. Here, permanently, not as my cook or my employee, but as my wife." Lily twisted in his arms to look at his face. He was serious, his dark eyes steady on hers. "Mason, are you asking me to marry you?" "I am. I know I should probably wait, should court you proper with flowers and fancy words, but that is not who I am. I am a rancher who works with his hands and speaks plain. And plain speaking, I love you, Lily Bradford. I want you to be my wife, to build this ranch together, to make a life together. Will you marry me?" Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. "Yes. Yes, of course I will marry you." His smile was brilliant, transforming his entire face. He kissed her deeply, thoroughly, and when they finally broke apart, they were both breathless. "When?" she asked. "Soon as you want. We can go into town tomorrow, talk to the preacher, make it official. Unless you want something bigger. I know some women dream of fancy weddings. I do not need fancy. I just need you." They were married 3 days later in a simple ceremony in Paso Robles. The ranch hands attended, along with a few townspeople who'd become friendly with Lily on her occasional trips to purchase supplies. She wore a new dress, pale blue with lace at the collar, that Mason had insisted on buying for her. He wore a suit that looked slightly uncomfortable on his broad frame, but his eyes never left her face during the ceremony. Afterward, they had a celebration at the ranch. Lily cooked an enormous meal, with help from several of the town women, and there was music and dancing and laughter. It was simple and joyful, and Lily thought she'd never been happier than she was in that moment, dancing with her husband under the October sky. That night, they came together as husband and wife in Mason's room, which was now their room. He was gentle and patient, taking his time despite his obvious desire, making sure she felt safe and cherished. Afterward, lying in his arms with her head on his chest, Lily marveled at how much her life had changed in just a few short months. "What are you thinking?" Mason asked, his hand stroking through her hair. "That I almost did not come to Paso Robles. I was considering heading farther north to Sacramento or San Francisco. If I had, I never would have met you." His arms tightened around her. "But you did come here, and you are mine now, and I am never letting you go. I do not want you to." They fell asleep, tangled together, and Lily dreamed of the future for the first time in years. The first year of marriage was not without challenges. The ranch demanded constant work, and there were times when money was tight, when the weather did not cooperate, when cattle got sick or fences needed constant repair. But through it all, they worked together. Lily managed the household with efficient competence, and Mason came to rely on her judgment for more than just cooking. She had a good head for numbers, and he began including her in decisions about the ranch finances. She also proved to have an eye for horses, and when they bought their first breeding pair, she took charge of their care with enthusiasm. The men accepted her new position as the boss's wife with good grace, still appreciating her cooking, and now also coming to her with small problems they might not have taken to Mason. She developed a reputation in the area as a fair and kind woman, and other ranchers' wives began to visit, creating a small social circle that Lily had never experienced before. In the spring of 1883, Lily realized she was pregnant. She'd suspected for a few weeks, but she waited to be certain before telling Mason. When she finally did, over breakfast one morning after the men had left, his reaction was everything she could have hoped for. "A baby." He looked stunned, then delighted. "We are having a baby." "Yes. I think I am about 3 months along, so the baby should arrive in the late fall." He came around the table and pulled her into his arms, holding her like she was made of glass. "Are you feeling all right? Do you need to rest more? Should we hire someone to help with the cooking?" "I am fine, Mason, healthy and strong, and we are not hiring anyone else. I like running the household. But if it gets to be too much, then I will tell you and we will figure something out. But for now, I am perfectly capable of doing my job." He kissed her forehead, her cheeks, her lips. "I love you so much. You have given me everything I did not even know I wanted. You saved my life," she said simply. "That day in town, I was at the end of my rope. I do not know what I would have done if you had not offered me work. You gave me hope when I had none left. You would have found a way. You are the strongest person I know." He placed his hand on her still flat stomach. "And now we are going to have a child. I am the luckiest man alive." The pregnancy progressed smoothly. Lily felt well, with only occasional morning sickness that passed by the 4th month. She continued to cook and run the household, though Mason became increasingly protective as her belly swelled. He insisted she rest more, hired a young woman from town to come help with laundry and heavy cleaning, and generally fussed over her until she was torn between exasperation and affection. On a cool November evening, with the first hints of winter in the air, Lily went into labor. Mason sent Billy riding into town for the doctor and the midwife, then stayed by her side, holding her hand through each contraction. The labor was long and difficult, lasting through the night and into the following morning, but when their son finally arrived, red-faced and squalling, Lily thought all the pain was worth it. "A boy," the midwife announced, placing the cleaned and wrapped baby in Lily's arms. "Strong lungs on this one." Lily looked down at her son, at his tiny perfect face and dark hair, and felt her heart expand with a love so fierce it was almost frightening. Mason sat beside her on the bed, his arm around her shoulders, and they both stared at the miracle they'd created. "He is perfect," Mason said, his voice rough with emotion. "What should we name him?" They discussed names, unable to decide. But looking at her son now, Lily knew. "James, after your father." Mason looked at her in surprise. "My father was not a kind man." "No, but you turned out well despite that. And maybe by naming our son after him, we can honor what was good in your father and leave behind what was not." "James Lawson," Mason said softly. He touched the baby's tiny hand, and little James wrapped his fingers around his father's thumb. "Hello, son. Welcome to the ranch." The years that followed were full and busy. James grew into a sturdy toddler, then a curious little boy who followed his father everywhere. Lily gave birth to a daughter in 1885, a quieter child they named Margaret after Lily's mother. Then another son in 1887, William, who had his mother's green eyes and his father's stubborn streak. The ranch prospered. Mason's hard work and Lily's careful management of their finances allowed them to expand, buying more land, increasing their herd. They built a larger house, with separate bedrooms for the children and a big kitchen that was Lily's domain. They hired more hands, and Lily no longer did all the cooking herself, though she still oversaw the household and prepared special meals for holidays and celebrations. Through it all, their love deepened and matured. The passionate romance of their early days evolved into something steadier, a partnership built on mutual respect and shared goals. They still stole moments alone when they could, riding out to check the far fences together or sitting on the porch after the children were asleep. Mason never stopped insisting she eat regularly, always making sure she took care of herself even as she took care of everyone else. One evening in the summer of 1890, they sat on the porch watching the sunset, just as they had done 8 years earlier when Mason had first hinted at his feelings. James was 10 now, chasing his younger siblings around the yard. Margaret, at 5, was trying to catch fireflies in a jar. William, just 3, toddled after them on unsteady legs. "You ever think about that day we met?" Lily asked, leaning against Mason's shoulder. "All the time. You looked so fierce standing outside that store, trying so hard not to show how desperate you were." "I was eating every other day, trying to stretch my supplies. I did not know where my next meal would come from or where I would sleep that night. And I told you never to skip a meal again. You did, and you have been making sure I do not ever since." She smiled at him. "You take care of me, even when I do not realize I need it. That is what love is, I think, paying attention, noticing what someone needs, and doing what you can to provide it." He kissed her temple. "You do the same for me. We take care of each other." "Yes, we do." They sat in comfortable silence, watching their children play. Lily thought about the frightened, hungry woman she'd been when she arrived in Paso Robles and marveled at how far she'd come. She had everything she'd dreamed of during those desperate days: security, a home, a family, love. She had built a life alongside Mason, and it was better than anything she could have imagined. James came running up to the porch, his face flushed with exertion. "Papa, can we have a campfire, please? With singing?" Mason looked at Lily, who nodded. "All right, son. Go gather wood with Billy, and we will have a fire." James whooped with delight and ran off. Margaret and William came to sit on the porch steps, and Lily went inside to fetch blankets and to prepare some snacks. When she returned, Mason was already starting the fire, and the ranch hands were gathering around, guitars appearing from somewhere. They spent the evening around the fire, singing old songs and telling stories. The children eventually fell asleep, and Mason carried them one by one to their beds. When he returned, most of the hands had drifted back to the bunkhouse, and only Tom remained, finishing a last cup of coffee. "You two are good together," the old cowboy said, looking at Mason and Lily with warm eyes. I have seen a lot of marriages in my time, and most of them are about duty or convenience. But you two genuinely love each other. It is a beautiful thing to see." "Thank you, Tom," Lily said softly. "That girl you hired 8 years ago, boss, best decision you ever made." Tom stood, stretching. "Well, I am off to bed. Good night." When they were alone, Mason pulled Lily into his arms. "He is right, you know. Hiring you was the best decision I ever made, though it stopped being about hiring pretty quickly." "It did. I fell in love with you so fast, Mason. I tried to remember my place, but I could not help it. Good thing I fell just as hard." He kissed her deeply, and after all these years it still made her heart race. "Come to bed with me, Mrs. Lawson." "Yes, Mr. Lawson." They walked into the house hand in hand, closing the door on the night. And as Lily fell asleep in her husband's arms, in the house they'd built together, surrounded by the children they'd created, she thought about that desperate woman outside the general store who'd been eating every other day just to survive. That woman never could have imagined this life, this happiness, this love. But she'd been brave enough to accept help when it was offered, and that bravery had led her here. Mason had told her never to skip a meal again, and she'd thought it was just about food, but it had been about so much more. It had been about letting someone care for her, about accepting that she deserved to be looked after, about opening her heart to the possibility of love. And in return, she'd given him the same thing, someone to care for, to love, to build a life with. The years continued to unfold, bringing new challenges and joys. The children grew, strong and healthy, each developing their own personalities and dreams. James proved to have his father's talent for ranching, spending every spare moment learning the business. Margaret had her mother's practical mind and developed a passion for numbers, eventually helping with the ranch accounts. William was the adventurous one, always looking for new things to explore and experience. In 1895, Mason's oldest brother died, leaving the family ranch in Texas without clear leadership. Mason traveled back for the funeral, bringing Lily and the children with him. It was Lily's first time in Texas, and she was fascinated by the different landscape, the different culture. Mason's surviving brother, Marcus, was struggling to keep the ranch running, and there were difficult conversations about the future. "We could move back," Mason said one night in the hotel room. The children were asleep in the adjoining room, and he and Lily were talking quietly. "Marcus needs help, and it is the family ranch." "Do you want to move back?" Lily asked carefully. Mason was quiet for a long moment. "No, I love my brother and I hate seeing him struggle, but my life is in California now. Our life is there. The ranch we built together, the community we are part of. I cannot give that up, even for family obligation." "Then we will not. But maybe we can help in other ways. Money, advice, whatever Marcus needs." "You are sure? I do not want you to think I am putting our ranch ahead of family duty. I think you are honoring the life we built together, and that is exactly what you should do." Lily took his hand. "We will help Marcus, but we are staying in California. That is where we belong." They worked out an arrangement where they would provide financial support to help stabilize the Texas ranch, and Marcus would send his oldest son to California to learn ranching from Mason, before eventually returning to take over the family place. It was a compromise that satisfied everyone, and when they returned to Paso Robles, Lily felt more certain than ever that they'd made the right choice. In 1898, when Lily was 36 and Mason was 48, they welcomed their fourth and final child, another daughter they named Sarah. The pregnancy had been unexpected, and the birth was harder than the previous ones, but mother and baby both came through healthy. James was 16 by then, already working the ranch alongside his father. Margaret was 13, a serious girl who helped her mother run the household. William was 11, wild and energetic, constantly getting into trouble but impossible not to love. Sarah's arrival brought new life to the household. The older children doted on their baby sister, and Mason, who'd always been a devoted father, was impossibly soft with his youngest daughter. Lily watched him carry the baby around, talking to her about the ranch and the cattle, and fell in love with him all over again. "You are a wonderful father," she told him one evening, watching him rock Sarah to sleep. "I had a lot of practice," he said with a smile, "and I learned from the best." "You are an amazing mother, Lily. Our children are lucky to have you. They are lucky to have both of us. We are a team. Always have been, always will be." The new century arrived, bringing changes to the world around them. Electricity came to Paso Robles and eventually to their ranch. Automobiles began appearing on the roads, though Mason insisted horses were still more practical for ranch work. The Wild West that Lily had first encountered was slowly being tamed, civilized, transformed into something new. But through all the changes, their love remained constant. They weathered droughts and good years, financial struggles and prosperity, the normal challenges of raising 4 children and running a large ranch. They grew older together, Mason's hair going gray at the temples, lines deepening around Lily's eyes. But when they looked at each other, they still saw the people they'd been that night in the storm, confessing their feelings and taking the first brave steps toward building a life together. In 1905, James married a local rancher's daughter and brought her to live at the ranch. Mason built them a house on the property, close enough to be part of the family operation but far enough for independence. The following year, their first grandchild arrived, a boy with James's dark hair and his mother's bright smile. Mason and Lily stood together looking at their grandson, marveling at how quickly time had passed. "We are grandparents," Lily said wonderingly. "How did we get old enough to be grandparents?" "I do not feel old when I am with you," Mason said, wrapping his arm around her waist. "You still make my heart race like you did that first night. You are a sentimental old cowboy. Only for you." Margaret went to college in San Francisco, one of the first women from Paso Robles to pursue higher education. She studied business and returned to help modernize the ranch operations, implementing new accounting systems and improving efficiency. William, true to his adventurous nature, joined the army and saw the world before eventually returning home to settle down. Sarah, their youngest, was still a child, but she showed signs of being the most stubborn and determined of all their children. On a summer evening in 1908, the family gathered at the ranch for a celebration. It was Mason and Lily's 25th wedding anniversary, and their children had organized a party. Friends and neighbors from all over the area attended, and there was food and music and dancing, just like there had been at their wedding so many years before. As the sun set, Mason led Lily away from the crowd, out to the same porch where they'd shared so many conversations over the years. She went willingly, her hand in his, and they stood together looking out at the land they'd built a life on. 25 years, Mason said. "Seems impossible that so much time has passed. It went so fast. Sometimes I still feel like that frightened girl who stumbled into town with nothing but a bag of clothes and a desperate hope for work. You were never just some frightened girl. You were the bravest person I had ever met, determined to survive no matter what it took. Surviving is different from living. You taught me that. You taught me that it was all right to accept help, to let someone take care of me, to build something lasting and real." Mason turned to face her, taking both her hands in his. "Do you remember what I told you that first day, about never skipping meals? Of course. You have been nagging me about eating regularly for 25 years, he smiled. "It was never just about the food, though. It was about you valuing yourself, about understanding that you deserve to be taken care of, to have good things in your life. You were so busy surviving that you had forgotten how to live. I wanted to remind you. Tears pricked at Lily's eyes. You did more than remind me. You showed me what love could be, what a true partnership looked like. You gave me a home, a family, a life I never dreamed was possible. We gave each other those things. This ranch, these children, this life, we built it together. Equal partners always. Always, Lily agreed. They kissed as the sun set behind them, bathing everything in golden light. From inside the house, they could hear laughter and music, the sounds of their family and friends celebrating. It was a good life, Lily thought, a beautiful life. And it had all started because a cowboy had noticed a hungry woman outside a general store and decided to offer her more than just a job. The years continued their steady march forward. William married and had children of his own. Margaret surprised everyone by marrying a professor from San Francisco and moving to the city, though she remained involved in the ranch business from a distance. Sarah grew into a spirited young woman who knew her own mind and refused to be constrained by anyone's expectations. Mason's hair went fully gray, and his joints ached on cold mornings, but he still rode out to check the fences and oversee the cattle. Lily's hands developed arthritis, making the fine work she'd once done so easily more difficult, but she still managed the household and kept everyone organized. They slowed down, yes, but they never stopped working, never stopped being partners in running the ranch. In 1915, on a cool spring morning, Mason woke with pain in his chest. Lily sent immediately for the doctor, but they both knew what it was. His heart, which had been so strong for so long, was finally showing signs of weakness. The doctor prescribed rest and limited activity, and for a few weeks, Mason complied. But being idle went against his nature, and soon he was back to light work, ignoring Lily's worried looks. "I cannot just sit around waiting to die," he told her. "I need to be useful, to feel like I am contributing. You have contributed more than most men ever do. You built this ranch from nothing. You raised 4 children. You have been a good husband and father and employer. You are allowed to rest. I will rest when I am dead." He softened his tone, reaching for her hand. "I am not trying to be difficult, Lily. I just need to feel like myself, and myself is a man who works." She understood, even if she did not like it. So she watched over him carefully, made sure he did not overdo it, and treasured every moment they had together. She'd learned long ago that nothing in life was guaranteed, that the people you loved could be taken from you without warning. She would not waste the time they had left. On a summer evening in 1918, with the world at war but their small corner of California peaceful, Mason and Lily sat on their porch watching the sunset. They'd been doing this for over 30 years now, and it never got old. The view was the same, the ritual was the same, but each time felt special because they were together. "You ever regret it?" Lily asked. "Offering a job to a desperate stranger?" "Not for a single second. You were the best thing that ever happened to me." Mason squeezed her hand. "Though I think we both know it stopped being about the job pretty quickly." "It did. I was in love with you within a month of arriving, terrified but in love." "Terrified of what?" "Of losing it all. Of you deciding I was not worth keeping around. Of waking up one day back where I started, alone and hungry and scared. Never going to happen. You are stuck with me, Lily Lawson, for as long as we both shall live. I know that now, but it took time to believe it, to trust that I really was safe and loved and home." They sat in comfortable silence as the last light faded from the sky. Inside the house, Sarah was cooking supper, and they could hear her singing to herself. Their other children were scattered across the state, living their own lives, but they visited often, bringing grandchildren and stories and love. "We did all right, did we not?" Mason said softly. "We did better than all right. We built something beautiful." "Yes, we did." Mason lived 3 more years, his heart growing progressively weaker, but his spirit never dimming. He died peacefully in his sleep in the winter of 1921, with Lily beside him. She held his hand as he took his last breath, and though her heart broke, she was grateful they'd had so many years together, grateful for every moment from that first meeting outside the general store to this final goodbye. The ranch continued under James's management, with input from all the siblings. Lily remained in the main house, still overseeing the household even as her own health began to fail. Her children worried about her living alone, but she insisted she was fine, that she needed to be in the house where she and Mason had built their life together. She lived another 12 years, surrounded by children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told stories about the old days, about the Wild West that had slowly been tamed, about the cowboy who'd seen a hungry woman and offered her more than just food. She made sure her grandchildren understood the value of hard work, of kindness, of looking out for those in need. On a warm spring day in 1933, Lily Bradford Lawson closed her eyes for the last time. She was 71 years old, and she'd lived a life far richer and longer than that desperate woman outside the general store could ever have imagined. Her last thoughts were of Mason, of the love they'd shared, and of the family they'd created together. She was buried next to him on a hill overlooking the ranch, and their descendants gathered to pay their respects. As the sun set over the California hills, painting the sky in shades of gold and orange, it felt fitting. This land, this place, had been their home, their haven, the foundation on which they'd built everything that mattered, and it had all started with a simple command: do not skip a meal again. Those words had been about more than food. They'd been about care and concern and the beginning of love. They'd been about one person seeing another's need and choosing to help, choosing to reach out, choosing to offer something better than mere survival. Lily and Mason's great-grandchildren would tell the story to their own children and grandchildren, keeping alive the memory of the woman who'd eaten only every other day to stretch her rations, and the cowboy who told her never to skip a meal again. It became a family legend, a reminder that love could bloom in the most unlikely circumstances, and that sometimes the greatest gifts came from the simplest acts of kindness. The ranch they'd built together continued to prosper for generations, a living testament to what two people could create when they worked together with love and determination. And every evening when the sun set over the California hills, it seemed to shine a little brighter on that spot where Lily and Mason were buried side by side, eternally together, forever home. Their love story became woven into the fabric of Paso Robles itself, a tale told in the saloons and the church and around dinner tables. The young people of the town, facing their own struggles and uncertainties, found hope in knowing that Lily had arrived with nothing and built everything. They found inspiration in Mason's decision to help a stranger, to see past her desperate circumstances to the person underneath. The house where they'd raised their family stood for nearly a century, weathering storms and dry seasons, expansions and renovations. Each generation of Lawsons added something new while respecting what had come before. The kitchen where Lily had cooked thousands of meals remained largely unchanged, because no one wanted to erase the space where so much love and nourishment had been created. James's son eventually took over the ranch, and then his son after that. By the time the 21st century arrived, the Wild West was long gone, replaced by highways and cities and all the trappings of modern life. But the ranch remained, a connection to the past, a reminder of simpler times when hard work and love could build empires. Historians came to interview the surviving family members, wanting to document life in the late 1800s California. They were fascinated by Lily's story, by her journey from desperate poverty to prosperity, and by the romance that had sparked between her and Mason. It was a tale that captured imaginations, showing that even in the hardest times, beauty and love could flourish. The family preserved Lily's handwritten recipes, Mason's ranch ledgers, photographs and letters that told the story of their lives. These became treasured heirlooms, passed down through generations, physical proof that their love story had been real. Young brides read Lily's letters to Mason, marveling at the deep affection that flowed through every word. Young grooms studied Mason's approach to ranching and to marriage, trying to learn from his example. In the end, what Lily and Mason had built was not just a successful ranch or a large family, though those were certainly achievements to be proud of. What they'd really created was a legacy of love, of partnership, of choosing each other every single day despite hardships and challenges. They'd shown that you did not need wealth or status or perfect circumstances to build something beautiful. You just needed commitment, care, and the courage to open your heart. The story of the woman who ate only every other day and the cowboy who told her never to skip a meal again became more than just their story. It became a symbol of hope, a reminder that sometimes the darkest moments come right before the dawn. Lily had been at her lowest point when she stumbled into Paso Robles, hungry and exhausted and nearly broken. But she'd been brave enough to keep going, to accept help, to take a chance on a stranger's offer. And Mason had been perceptive enough to see past her circumstances, wise enough to recognize someone worth investing in, and kind enough to offer help without expectation of anything in return. His initial interest might have been romantic, but his actions were motivated by simple human decency, seeing someone in need and doing what he could to help. Together, they'd created something that lasted far beyond their own lifetimes. Their children carried their values forward, teaching their own children about hard work and kindness, and the importance of taking care of each other. The ranch hands who'd worked for Mason told stories about his fairness and Lily's warmth, spreading their reputation throughout the region. The community they'd been part of remembered them fondly, grateful for the contributions they'd made. As the years turned into decades and then into a full century, the particulars of their daily lives faded, but the essence of their story remained. A woman alone, a man willing to help, a love that grew from kindness into something strong enough to weather any storm. It was a simple story, really, but it was also timeless because it spoke to fundamental human needs, the need to be seen, to be valued, to be loved. In the end, Lily Bradford Lawson and Mason Lawson were just two people who found each other at the right moment, when they each needed what the other could provide. But they took that moment and built a lifetime from it, a beautiful testament to what love could create. And their story, passed down through generations, continued to inspire long after they were gone, a light shining across time, reminding everyone who heard it that kindness matters, that love endures, and that sometimes the best things in life start with the simplest gesture. Don't skip a meal again.